So I actually want to start with, get a little meta. You've written many books, and most of them have been around your academic work. A lot of your research around intelligence and creativity. You had a book on humanistic psychology, which I loved. I believe this is the first book you've ever done that is very much targeted towards a mainstream audience and is addressing the culture at large.
What am I doing?
What are you doing?
This one was really, it is aimed for a general audience. I want everyone and their mother to read this book.
Okay. Why?
Because I think that this mentality that I talk about in this book is really holding people back in life from reaching their full potential. And I know we're going to talk about what that mindset is. And I really want to empower people to really rise above.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
So the way I'd like to do this, I'd like to kind of spend the first part of this conversation establishing some definitions.
Sure.
Because there are some terms in here that probably aren't widely known. And then you also address some very well-known psychological terms, things like trauma and self-esteem, in a bit of a new way or a different way that's a little bit contrarian. So I'd like to spend the first part of this conversation kind of going through those definitions and trying to get an understanding so that we can build a vocabulary together with the audience.
Definitely.
And then the second half of the conversation, we can start talking about the cultural issues,
societal
the
implications.
Totally.
Yeah.
So why don't we start with the concept that's front and center in the book, this idea of a victim mindset, and how is it different from actual victimhood?
Often when we hear the phrase victim mindset, we often think the other person, right? So we, people on the right, they hear victim mindset, they're like, oh, the libtards, right? And the people on the left, they hear a victim mindset, they're like, oh, that's Trump, you know? In this book, I wanted to show that we all can fall prey to this mindset. It's a dynamic mindset, so throughout the course of our day, we can find ourselves starting to get into this spiral of thinking where we start to blame all our problems on others. Maybe it's a person or it's a group. And we don't take responsibility for how we're showing up. We may feel like we're even entitled to special privileges because we've suffered, or we our fragility, our current fragility. And I want to make clear it's a perpetual victim mindset. It's not like a one-off thing. I mean, there are a lot of people who go through horrible things, and you don't have a victim mindset every time you are victimized. You can be victimized and not have a victim mindset. You can have not been victimized and have a victim mindset.
Can you walk us through a couple examples of that? What's an example of, say, being victimized but not having a victim mindset, and then give us an example of not being victimized and having a victim mindset?
Well, you can be, I think all of us know what it's like to deal with being a victim of life. I think it's part of the price of being human. There's, if you're going to expect that life is going to go well for you all the time. And then, of course, there's horrible things like abuse, right? Or emotional abuse, physical abuse, violence. These are all horrible things. And a victim mindset is one where you sort of everywhere you go, it's generalized, like I said. So maybe you go to the Starbucks and you're the last person in line and you're thinking to yourself, oh man, I really deserve to be at the front of this line. I have a worse day than everyone else here. You don't even know what everyone else's day is like, right?
Yeah.
But and you sort of everywhere you go, you kind of have that certain mindset. And it's really not conducive to growth at all and learning. So I really do want to be very clear. I separate victimhood from having a victim mindset. And then you can also have a lot of people who nothing has terrible has happened to them, but they use the victim mindset as a way to get certain resources and sort of special privileges.
Interesting.
And we do see that in our society, but I know you want to wait till the second
half. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a victim mindset is in many ways defined by a sense of entitlement, a sense of something in my life is hard, and I believe it should not be hard. I believe it should be easy. Essentially.
Yeah. Entitlement is a core part of it. It really is. You feel entitled to not have to work for things, But I want to make very clear as well, this book is a very apolitical book, and that was really hard trying to find a voice. Has anyone noticed we live in a really political climate right now, where everything gets politicized?
Yeah.
And I wanted to make it very clear that I wanted to be like, could I write a book on overcoming a victim mindset that is apolitical? Where I show people that an empowerment mindset is really where it's at.
So that leads into the next definition, which is the opposite of a victim mindset, an empowerment mindset. So how would you define an empowerment mindset, and how would you apply it to some of the same situations?
Yeah, I'm such a professor that I want to ask questions to the audience and stuff. And I can't help myself. But has anyone played improv? Anyone ever does it? Yes. There's something called yes and with improv. And to me, an empowerment mindset is yes ending life. It's saying, look, a terrible thing has happened to me, and I got this. I feel like so much in our society today, we just stop at these terrible things have happened to me, and that we just stop there. And I'm not seeing a lot of empowerment, I feel like I used to. I remember when I was a kid, it was nice, it was good to write college essays about how you had horrible things happening and that you overcame them, or at least you tried to overcome them. And now you just get into college for saying you've had things bad happen to you, and that's it. They're like, go to Harvard. You had something bad happen to you. You'll fit our quota or something. And so I think that I want to kind of bring back this yes end that life is a shit show. Can I say that? Yeah. Life is a shit show.
We'll allow it.
I have a ticket in my wallet I carry with me. It says shit show on it. I seriously do, but I won't pull it. You'll believe me. You believe me that I have it in my wallet. It's cute. It's cute. It says shit show. Welcome to the shit show. But life is a shit show, and I take a very that's a very Buddhist acknowledgement of that. Life is suffering. Like the Buddha. He got it. He got it. I feel like he would like my book, maybe. I know he would transcend. For sure.
He probably would.
Yeah.
He probably would.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, you're a professor. You work with young people all the time, right?
Yeah.
Is this something that seems to be getting worse?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll stop you right there.
Okay, but I'm because I just. One of my notes here is this just, I actually wrote it right here, is, quote, is this just another version of kids these days, end quote.
Well, Jean Twenge has actually done a really good analysis of generations. I really highly recommend reading her book, Generations, if you're interested in looking somewhere for analyses. I think 2 generations ago, let's talk about the 80s for a second. There was, in early 90s, the self-esteem movement.
Yes.
Stuart Smalley. Does anyone remember Stuart Smalley from Saturday Night Live? No one? He would look in the mirror.
Gee golly, people like you.
I'm strong, I'm smart. And that was the self-esteem movement, and then I think that turned into a grandiose narcissism movement, and then I think that turned into a vulnerable narcissism movement. And so I think that this generation, I think the data bears that out. This generation, they don't think they're superior because they've done great things. They think they're superior because they've suffered.
Let's back up the truck a little bit. Vulnerable narcissism versus grandiose narcissism. I think when people hear the word narcissism, their mind immediately goes towards the grandiosity. Somebody who's just
most people have heard of grandiose narcissism.
Right. It's just like an overinflated sense of ego, self-importance, just a delusional relationship with reality and the people around them. What is vulnerable narcissism?
Well, just basically what I said. It's entitlement because you've suffered. And you can really look at it that way. But it tends to also be more associated with, some people call it closet narcissism, because you don't really know these people have it. They'll present themselves as really nice and polite, like me. I'm really a vulnerable narcissist. No, but I like self-deprecating humor. I find it allows you to connect with people better.
Thanks for sharing that.
But with vulnerable narcissism,
that's very vulnerable.
With vulnerable narcissism, they have these ideas in their head like they're just filled with resentments, and you don't necessarily see it. And a lot of people often are shocked,
Yeah.
That like, you'd be like, oh my God, I didn't realize all that was in your head, Bobby, whatever the person's name is, they're fuming. It's an introverted form of introversion. I often say if I had to choose, I'd rather be a grandiose narcissist than a vulnerable narcissist, if I had to choose. I don't want to choose,
Well,
obviously.
they definitely get laid more often. But
Mark!
I want to like...
That's his thing, though. He did write a book called Models.
Okay.
That's true, yeah.
I've always thought of it this way, that a grandiose narcissist
Yeah.
thinks to themselves, I'm better than everybody else,
Yes.
therefore I deserve special treatment.
Yes.
Whereas a vulnerable narcissist says to themselves, I am worse off than everybody else, therefore I deserve special
Well,
treatment.
that's right. That's exactly right.
And the outcome, it's the opposite internal monologue, but the outcome is exactly the same. Is this like just oozing sense of entitlement that is insufferable to be around.
But in terms of outcomes, we actually find some different outcomes. Vulnerable narcissism is correlated with depression and low self-esteem and a real sense of who am I?
Yeah.
A real uncertainty of self. I have a lot of compassion for. I tend to have more compassion for vulnerable narcissists than grandiose narcissists. Because vulnerable narcissists, I think, are suffering in a lot of ways, and a lot of them have had real trauma in their childhood, and it's a defense mechanism.
But don't they? Yeah. It's almost like I feel like a vulnerable narcissist it subtly seeks out to perpetuate their suffering because like that's actually where they derive their identity and their validation in the world, right? It's like if you're a vulnerable narcissist and you're constantly like seeking and getting special treatment because of all the suffering you're going through,
that's right.
Then you like have an incentive to seek out more suffering for yourself. Is that not true?
What a cycle. No. Why? Was I like that or something? What are you talking about?
What?
No, it's true. The identity, what you're bringing up is a victimhood identity.
Yeah.
And in an empowerment mindset framework or consciousness, you don't identify yourself solely with your victimhood. It's a yes-and thing. Yes, something has happened to me, but I'm more than that. See, what I want to do is move people to the empowerment mindset. And I'm really interested in education.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested in working with like K through 12 as well as college kids and really help them be empowered in the way that they think about their lives and their hardships and their challenges. Because it's not neglecting the pain at all. It's not, I call it honest love.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to find my voice with this book, and it was hard because I wanted it to be really SBK. That's what my friends call me. I wanted this book to be really, I wanted people to read this book like, oh, that's so SBK. I think there's a unique quirkiness and weirdness to me, And I wanted to be very honest in this book, and all the other voices out there didn't resonate with me. So I see a lot of the pull yourself up by the bootstraps crowd, and they're annoying, right? And then you have the coddling people.
Yeah.
And they're equally as annoying.
Yeah.
And so I was like, no, there's got to be a centrist voice here. And I call it honest love. And honest love is this. The love part is simply validating someone's real felt experience. It's, like let's do it. Let's role play.
Okay.
Mark, tell me something bad has happened to you.
Something bad has happened to me, Scott.
It's like what?
Oh,
he needs some improv classes.
A bus hit my cat.
Oh my God, that's horrible, Mark. But you know what? You got this. The cat might not have much hope, but you can get through this. I know you. I know you have deep reservoirs of resilience within you, but that is really shitty. And it's being there with the person as well.
Yeah.
And it's not neglecting it. It's being there with them. It's not pull yourself up by the bootstrap. I just haven't seen much of this voice that I wanted to create in this book because I'm seeing so many of the extremes in the other ways. But it's a way that empowers you, but also doesn't downplay the shitty thing that happened to you.
I feel like the pull yourself up by the bootstrap people, they correctly identify that like life is hard and you have to get up and move on. You have to do something. Yeah. But they miss it hurts and honoring the feelings and emotions that come with that hurt. And I feel like the coddling people is that they rightfully identify the hurt and they validate the emotions and the hurt, but there's no, okay, well now you have to get up and go do something, right? Like it's it is kind of a marrying of those two messages simultaneously.
And I see it. I see it all over Instagram. I have examples in the book. There are really big trauma. I don't know if you want to go there with the.
We'll get there.
Trauma,
we'll definitely get the trauma. Yeah.
Well, there are influencers that have millions of followers, and they spend all day just coddling their people. They're like, "Oh, you have trauma. It's okay if you don't get out of bed today or do anything. Were you an asshole today? It's because of your trauma. Don't worry. You're allowed to be an asshole." You know, and I read things like that, and I roll my eyes, quite frankly, because I don't think that's very empowering.
Yeah. I agree. You've mentioned self-esteem a couple times. Both of us take kind of shit on self-esteem in our books.
We do.
Oh, we do. I'm curious. What do you?
Have you guys read his books?
Yeah. Yay.
Yeah. Woo. No, come on.
Stop it.
That's amazing.
Stop it.
This guy's amazing.
What did the self-esteem movement get wrong, and what did it get right?
Yeah. Well, it got wrong. Are we talking about a self-esteem movement or a narcissism movement? Because I think a lot of what we call the self-esteem movement really is a narcissism movement. It's really not just you are enough, but it's you are better than others. A healthy self-esteem is a great thing. And I think we need to help kids and adults have a healthy self-esteem. Good parenting is one that offers warmth and validation and empowerment and instills a healthy self-esteem in kids. But what I see called a self-esteem movement really is a narcissism movement. It's like you get the trophy because your mom says so. That's it. That's the reason why.
Yeah. So it's like reward and validation just unconditionally with there's no struggle involved, there's no sacrifice involved. It's just like
there's two forms of pride psychologists have identified called hubristic pride and authentic pride. And it really is hubristic pride. It's pride. It's like it's unearned. It's like, oh, I'm the best. And they're kind of walking. And you can see hubristic pride by they've actually done studies looking at people's facial expressions, and you can tell different facial expressions. I don't have to do a Trump impression right now, right?
Yeah.
But that's the hubristic pride like I've ever seen. Objectively,
sure.
Regardless, even if you're the biggest Trump fan, you have to admit. Whatever. I guess I just found myself trying to do it. I'm not gonna do it. Stop it, Scott.
It's your book event, dude. Do whatever you want.
I almost wanted to go into a Trump impression, but I won't. But
we all hear plenty of Trump already.
Yes,
we don't need
but
more.
Authentic pride is correlated with well-being. It's correlated with happiness. It's correlated with low levels of narcissism, and it's one where you have a real pride in in mastery, and not in outcompeting others or being better than others, but in really mastering something that you're proud of.
Because you've done things and accomplished. Like what I'm hearing when you describe that is like kind of the hubristic pride or the unhealthy self-esteem is feeling good about yourself for absolutely no reason or made up reasons, whereas like a healthy self-esteem or a authentic pride is like, I've done shit, I've struggled, I survived, I've accomplished things, and I feel good about myself as a result. And like that's what we want to encourage. So it sounds like the way to actually instill a healthy self-esteem in young people requires a certain amount of struggle. Like you have to let them fall and struggle and have a hard time, and then let them help, like support them as they pick themselves up, and then that develops the healthy self-esteem instead of just like preventing them from falling on their face in the first place.
Definitely. I'm a big fan of play. And I think play is under attack. I mean, it's a weird thing to say, but with parents. I mean, I had a mother who coddled me, and so this is all like a pet peeve of mine as well.
Oh yeah.
I think that we should let kids, fall and learn about themselves. Obviously, not putting them in dangerous situations.
Sure.
But reasonably. Like for instance, my mom drove me to the bus stop. My senior year of high school. Where do you think my bus stop was? That's right, the bottom of my street. She drove me to the bus stop.
Yeah.
Did you hear what I just said?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's crazy, right? I mean, God bless my mom, but that's overprotective.
What were the repercussions of that? What happened when
Shame and humiliation from all my friends. Scott, did your mom literally just drive you to the bus stop?
right.
Dr. Alice here by any chance? I'm wearing your happy socks that you got me. Look at these. I had to give a shout out to that.
You mentioned trauma briefly earlier. There's a very popular book that probably most people
Let's see
have
if
heard
they can guess it. What do you think?
If there's one book about trauma, Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah.
You're not a huge fan. Give me what's wrong with that?
It is very popular, and it is. I will say it's the predominant narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole cadet of people, Gabor Mate as well, right, that talk about trauma as saying it's everywhere. It's the toxic society is why we have ADHD. It's why the way I see it is that's a victim mindset. It's really an instinctive. You're blaming all your problems on that one thing that happened to you when you were a kid, or you're blaming your ADHD or your autism on a toxic society, when all the research actually shows, for instance, ADHD has a really strong genetic component, and there's a very minimal effect of parenting on the development of ADHD. It's just part of neurodiversity, and there's a lot of strengths that can come from ADHD. So one thing I've been trying to kind of challenge is this narrative that, well, it's blame it all on the mom, or she didn't hug you enough when you were a kid. And I think that puts a lot of pressure on a mom as well. I can't tell you how many, parents email me thanking me for my writings. They're like, I think I'm a great parent, and my son still has these neurodevelopmental disorders. Is it all our fault? And I'm like, no, it's not all your fault. That's not what the science says at all about the situation. So that's one thing, is that it externalizes everything to the to maybe that one thing that happened to you when you were a kid, or to the toxic society. It's certainly not saying there's not a lot of grain of truth there. I mean, society is toxic. Gabor Mate is kind of right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no.
Trauma exists for sure.
Yeah. And we're gonna play yes and there's so much you can do to live a life with intention, purpose, and a future. The existential psychologist Irvi Yalom said, sooner or later, you have to give up all hope for a better past.
I love that.
And that book is basically the encapsulation. That quote is the encapsulation of my whole book. Mm-hmm. Really, I'm very future oriented in this book. Mm-hmm. It's saying that no matter who you are, no matter what has happened to you, I have nothing but empathy and compassion for that, and I really believe in your higher potential for growth. I will never stop, as long as I'm alive, extol how important it is to believe in the higher potential, in your own higher potential. That's the thread that's run through my whole career. Yeah. And this book is kind of, in a lot of ways, it's an inevitable culmination.
Yeah. I can see that, actually.
Cool.
It's like the Transcend was very much about the kind of the higher level self-actualization, the sailboat with the finding purpose and meaning in life and reaching your true potential and everything. And this feels much more like making sure you don't get stuck. At the bottom of the.
I'm really glad you're very astute.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Because that's one thing I didn't feel like I double-clicked enough on in Transcend. I feel like in Transcend I focus so much on the sail of my sailboat metaphor of self-actualization, and didn't take as much care as I wanted on the boat. Yeah. When you have holes in your boat, it's hard to open up that sail and to move in the direction you want to move in. So I want to help people really. Part one of this book is taking care of the sail. Yeah. Not the sail, sorry, the boat.
Yeah, the boat. Yeah. I want to come back to the trauma thing. I want to stay on the trauma thing for a little bit, though. I run into this all the time in my work, and from readers that I hear from, and people that I talk to all the time. There is a certain amount of value in I think, as an adult, going back and kind of auditing your childhood and your past, understanding maybe where things went wrong, or where things could have gone better, or maybe some things that happened when you just made the joke about your mom driving you to the bottom of the street, to pick up the bus. I do think there is some amount.
Not a joke, though.
No, I know. But there is.
I have trauma from that.
You will one day rise above it, I'm sure.
I hope so. I hope so.
But I do think there is a certain amount of value in like going back and doing that audit.
Yeah.
But you can't get stuck there. And I think that's where people get tripped up. And there's a seductiveness of getting stuck there.
I love that you said that. And I couldn't have thought of a better person to do this with, by the way, Mark. You are really, I feel seen by you. Sorry, just got real sentimental all of a sudden. But I always feel really seen by you. What was I going to say? What was your question?
People getting stuck auditing their past and their traumas.
Yeah, this book is not for everyone. And I know earlier I said it is for everyone.
It is for everyone.
But let me clarify what I mean. Let me clarify what I mean by this.
You're here to sell this thing. It is for everyone.
It is for everyone. It is for everyone. But
buy 2 copies.
I want to say that everyone is at a different stage of their healing journey.
Yes.
And this book is, in particular, like especially, I will say, for those who have had enough of their ruminating about something they can never change. And I can tell you, I have enough of a response from people. Like, I had an excerpt of this in Psychology Today magazine, the most recent edition of Psychology Today, and people, the letters I get, people saying, this is what I need to hear. So when I say this book's not for everyone, what I mean by that is not everyone's ready to hear this message. Some people might be really stuck in still survival mode in a way that they aren't ready. They're too terrified to get rid of their defense mechanisms and grow. And I think everything has its own time course. And I think that's really great to honor that for certain people. But I think there's a large enough audience of people who have had enough of going to therapy and just every week talking about the one thing that happened to them when they were 3. At a certain point in the therapy process, you're like, am I ever allowed to talk about my future?
Yeah. Yeah, it's at some point, and I had this experience with therapy when I was younger, and I know a lot of people have this experience. It's like you hit a point in therapy, you're like, okay, and so what?
Yeah.
Like, now what?
Yeah.
Right? All right, let's pivot into culture a little bit. I would actually, you teach at Columbia, you teach a lot of students. I think education is a nice place to start.
Okay.
Talking about this lack of healthy self-esteem, maybe a little bit of coddling going on. Like, I'm wondering, what role does the education system play in this, and where could it be better?
Huge. I think students can get indoctrinated into a victim mindset. I see it. I see it on campus. Everyone's blaming your fault. No, it's your fault. No, it's your fault. No, it always ends up being the administration's fault. It always eventually, it's president. There's now 3 interim presidents for a reason. Every time someone tries at Columbia to be president,
It's ironic that you teach at Columbia and wrote this book, by the way.
It is beyond ironic, and that's one of those moments I want to bring out my shit show.
Yeah, there you go.
Which I really do have in my wallet.
I'll
show
you.
people later if you want to see
100%
it. Say,
believe
Scott, can I see this shit?
Hang around after the show, you'll see his shit show.
But indoctrination is huge, and I think critical thinking is huge. I have a whole section in this book about that. I talk about various parts of the world. I even talk about in Israel, right? I talk about the situation in the Middle East. I think we can all agree it's a terrible situation. I think we need to recognize that it's possible for there to be multiple victims in a situation. That's another thing I argue in my book is like, we need to stop thinking about this. There's always the angel and the victim.
Yeah.
The angel can't do anything wrong, and the victim can only do things that are wrong.
Or the oppressor and the oppressed, right?
Thinking
it's
like that.
You can be both simultaneously.
Yeah, you can have, it's a shitty situation, I mean, to put it mildly. But both sides in their education systems, and I review some of the actual curriculum they're taught to hate. They're taught to hate. They're not taught to love. They're not taught, both sides are taught to hate. And I see it in America as well. I see indoctrination in a lot of ways in our various school systems where students are not taught critical thinking about thinking, okay, well, maybe this person has a different political view from you, but in what ways are you showing? It's called the buy-side bias. Mm-hmm. It's a real bias in the rationality literature, which I think is so prevalent. Where you as long as something is confirming your own preconceived ideas, you don't challenge it at all. You don't bother to like Google scholar it.
Of course.
You're like, of course that's true.
Yeah.
But I think we need to teach children how to think critically and to challenge their own biases, and to also challenge the notion that you have to hate your outgroup just because someone told you to hate.
Yeah.
A lot of people are told who their outgroup is, and a lot of people are told who they're supposed to hate. There, I said it.
Yeah. One of the statistics that I have been perplexed, fascinated by over the last 5 or 10 years is that when you look at mental health data among young people, you actually see the young people who struggle the most with mental health issues are from the most privileged and upper class backgrounds.
That's interesting.
And
what do you make of that?
I was going to ask you the same thing. I've spent years thinking about this and trying to kind of wrap my head around it. I'm curious what your opinion is.
It's interesting. You can't assume just because someone grows up in a poor neighborhood, therefore they necessarily have it worse psychologically. I've challenged that as well. I teach a course called The Science of Living Well. It's a big lecture hall course at Columbia. And I show some data. I'd be like, do you know that the average happiness levels of those in the slums of Calcutta is higher than the average American happiness? And people are shocked when they hear that. How is it possible? Well, connection is so important, right? If you can have, even in the poorest neighborhoods, the most dire circumstances, you still see often a really strong community, which is such a strong indicator of well-being. We have Kilm Castley, I think, in the audience, who's a world expert on the science of connection, and her research is incredible, showing this to be the case. So I think that's part of this story. Is first of all, I want to break down a lot of preconceptions we have about the privileged and about the marginalized people.
Yeah.
I really do want to cut that down. When I look at a marginalized person, I think to myself, they got this, like let's help them, see their higher potential. I don't think to myself, oh, they are going to be stuck the rest of their lives, let's, coddle them, So I really think we need to rethink a lot of the ways we think about these things and stop stereotyping people. I think a lot of these so-called privileged people maybe are really like trust fund people. I mean, I think, they're cut off, I think, in a lot of ways from, they're always wondering, is someone trying to get something from them, or, there might be a connection issue there.
I definitely think the fragmentation or isolation is a huge part of it. I wrote a little bit about this in my second book, but are you familiar with the concept, Alain de Botton's concept of status anxiety?
Yeah.
Right? It's there's a certain anxiety that grows proportionally with privilege, which is the anxiety of, am I doing enough? Am I reaching my potential? Am I going to achieve enough things? Which of these many opportunities should I pursue? Oh my God, if I pick one, I'm going to give up 8 others, right?
Yeah.
There's a real nervousness and neuroticism that kind of accompanies that. And I think about it, when I look at, say, somebody who grows up in a wealthy part of Los Angeles, like a young person, right? The world is their oyster, and they do have all the support in the world behind them. And there's got to be something absolutely terrifying about that, because you have no excuse if you fail, right? You have, if things don't work out, it is on you. So I can see how it becomes psychologically easier to either just retreat or to develop this kind of victimhood identity of everything that goes wrong is not your fault and it was thrust upon you.
I did tweet this the other day that I have observed that it's often the most successful, richest people who have the greatest victim mindset. I think that dovetails with what you're saying. That is an observation I've seen. I'm not going to start mentioning names, but I think we're all thinking about the same people. But it's a fascinating phenomenon. You can have the world can be your oyster, and still it's everyone's fault but yourself, right? And I think that's, I'm still trying to unpack and understand that. I also want to say something else. A big message in this book is that suffering is not a competition. And
Yes.
I don't think it has to be zero-sum. If we show, someone could be like, how dare you, Mark, show empathy for rich people, or how dare you, Mark, or privileged people, like, how dare you show any empathy towards them? Screw them, or whatever. But that's only in this way of thinking about life as though suffering is a competition. I really want us to change our collective consciousness about this, because I think it actually will increase our connections with each other if we can cross over and extend our own empathy to people who are very different from us.
That's actually really interesting. I never thought about it that way. That a huge part of this victim mindset is seeing happiness and suffering as zero sum.
Yeah, I really think it is.
Like the happier you are, the more miserable I must be, and how that must be unfair,
it's
right?
It's that you've decided you're going to play the victimhood Olympics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And get a gold medal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so everyone's competing for that spot in the of the victim, because psychologically the research shows that if you get victim status, you become almost a protected class where you don't have you can do no wrong. You can do no wrong. So it's a very coveted thing to have that status. Of course, people
right, because any
go
mistake
through
you make is justified by your trauma and your victimhood, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Especially in intractable conflicts like the Middle East, which I really took a lot of thought and care on that chapter, and really interviewed a lot of world experts trying to solve that. And I offer some solutions from a psychological perspective.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, thank you. It's tough. It's tough, but
Yeah.
I think psychologists need to put their hat in the ring, because to me it's as I argue in the book, it's not a resources issue, it's a needs issue.
Yeah.
It's a psychological needs issue at its core. If you only think of it as a resource allocation issue, you'll completely miss the point.
Interesting. Speaking of victimhood Olympics, they're mostly competed on social media. And I think we would be remiss to not talk about this culture of victimhood that we seem to live in without talking about social media and the role that it plays. In what areas obviously social media does a lot of things, but in what areas does it really seem to magnify and reward this sort of dynamic?
Jonathan Haidt has recently written a book about this called The Anxious Generation, and I bring in some of his ideas as well as some other ideas to argue that there's a lot of contagion that happens on social media, especially among young people, where you almost feel if one person is talking about their pain and their vulnerability and their suffering, and you're seeing they're getting lots of likes, it creates a sort of a peer pressure. That, oh my gosh, now I need to put the light on me, and let me think quickly. What's something terrible happened to me today at school? Oh yeah, okay. Put on some fake tears.
Yeah.
But so there's a lot of peer pressure to outdo each other in terms of that, because I think that social media really rewards that.
Yeah.
Especially TikTok. Everyone is neurodivergent now on TikTok. I've noticed that, and everyone has trauma.
Okay.
Suddenly, everyone has trauma.
Yeah.
It can't be possible for everyone to have trauma.
Isn't it if everybody has trauma, then nobody has trauma?
I think about that a lot. Gabor Mate would, just to be fair and nuanced, he would say no. He would say, because of the toxic society, we are all legitimately traumatized. But my view on the matter, I do like to give credit to other people and their thoughts, even though I disagree with them. I personally am of the mind that it should have a clinical definition, or else the people where truly horrible things have happened to them, they won't get singled out for resources that they really require.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that actually, I thought about that earlier, and I do think it's such an important point, and you see this happen a lot in psychology. Everything's kind of a spectrum, right? There's trauma exists on a spectrum, anything from surviving the Holocaust to your dog dies, right?
There are phrases like mini trauma, and I just saw recently in the literature micro trauma.
Yes, micro trauma, yeah. It does strike me that there should be some sort of proportionality to a lot of this stuff that obviously gets lost.
Yeah, I mean, yes, and
Yeah.
my whole definition of trauma is one that, like, I don't take it away from someone if they say they've been traumatized. I don't say, like, come on, it should be proportional. You know, like, to me, that's callous in a way, for me to respond to someone that way.
Sure.
So, like, my definition of trauma is any event that substantially causes a violation in your expectations of how you thought the world worked. It causes a psychological seismic earthquake in a way, where your violations are, oh, I thought the world was a good place, this horrible thing happened, and now I suddenly see the world as a bad place, for instance. Yeah. So I do take people at their face value when they say they have trauma. And I do think that people are using clinical language now in a way to mean anything. And you do see that and there's been some analyses of that on TikTok, how every person they don't like is a narcissist. Yep. Particularly the ex-husband is always the narcissist. Yeah. Everyone has trauma. Everyone has neurodiversity. Like therapy language has infiltrated society so much now that these words no longer have clinical meaning.
Well, and they without the context, I think they actually turn corrosive. There's a fantastic piece. There's a guy on Substack named Freddie DeBoer.
Yeah.
And he
hates the phrase neurodiversity.
Oh, does he?
Yeah. Well, I like the phrase neurodiversity.
He wrote this fantastic piece last year that it just like squared so many of these questions for me, which is he talked about how there are concepts such as trauma, vulnerability, disclosure, neurodiversity, right? Like, and in a clinical context, when you're one-on-one with a therapist in like a very safe and confined environment, those are very useful things they're useful skills to develop, and they're useful things to laud and try to cultivate in yourself. When you remove those from the confined and confidential therapeutic environment and you put them in society at large, they turn destructive, right? Like when you start rewarding people for how aggrieved that they feel, or how depressed they've been, or how like their PTSD is flaring up, you get into this gross validation cycle of socially rewarding people for how much they're suffering, and that quickly takes you to a very dark place.
Absolutely. I know we're going to do a Q&A in a second, but I'd be remiss if I didn't leave on a very bright, positive note.
Sure.
Let's get out of the darkness for a second. Part 2 of this book is how to find the light within yourself, and to how to find your character strengths, and to find the parts of you that aren't broken. Yeah. See, you can keep ruminating on all the ways you're broken, but I really want to move people to a model where they start to discover the amazing strengths they have within themselves, the gratitude practice and gratefulness practice they can have even for the shitty things in life, the light they can find within themselves, and even using their sensitivity. Do we have anyone in the room who's a highly sensitive person? You're a highly sensitive person? That's what's up, man. That's what's up. I've argued, as I argue in this book, you can really channel that in a lot of ways for creativity, and it can be a beautiful gift. So I really want to move away from this model that these things, you view yourself broken because you have neurodiversity, you have ADD, or you've had trauma. You're not broken because you've had trauma. Yeah. Okay? Yes, it's a terrible thing that happened to you, but there's still a lot of parts of you that aren't broken. And that's ultimately the message of the book. Yeah. And I as you know, I'm a huge fan of the literature around post-traumatic growth. Yeah. Which to me is maybe the most under-broadcast research in the world. Agreed. That for every person who experiences PTSD, there's like 4 or 5 people who experience post-traumatic growth, which is people go through a traumatic event, and when you ask them a year, 2 years, 3 years later, they actually say, it's one of the best things that ever happened to me. Yeah, I mean, no one would ever say, I'd rather my son didn't die so that I could have more friends, or whatever. But it's the mentality of, because it's happened and I can't change the past, what am I going to do now moving forward? How am I going to try to make this productive? Like, I have the example of this rabbi. He says, I've become a more sensitive rabbi, I've become kinder, I've increased my spirituality, my creativity. I would give all that up in a second if I could have my son back. Yeah. But the truth is, I can't. I thought we were going to end on a light note. I got emotional. I got emotional because, my heart in this book is really, it was really hard, guys, finding a voice that suited me Does that make sense? Like you see a lot of people talking about victim mindset in very unempathetic ways. I don't even know if that's a word, unempathetic, but
It is now.
I made it, yeah. But I wanted to do it in a way that showed people that you don't have to hold yourself back in life.
Yeah. Well, you did a great job, dude.
Thank you so much.
It's a wonderful book. I'm excited for everybody to read it.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Okay.
Dr. Scott Barry Kaufman.
Thank you. I would love to do a Q&A.
Yeah, we will.
Okay. So say this is more day-to-day tactical. One is like struggling a lot in any given circumstances. Maybe it's life, going through divorce, 3 kids screaming, or maybe it's running a startup.
Yeah.
When there's the option to spiral and go into victimhood by oneself, I found that it's a release option, right? It's a relief of sorts. And how do you, to oneself in their inner dialogue, kind of action against that?
It is a relief, and it's the default option. Research shows that learned helplessness is not actually learned. They got it wrong. In humans, passivity is the default. It's our default response. What has to be learned and overcome is hope. My worst nightmare happened yesterday. I've been dreaming about this for 25 years, like if this would ever happen, and that's getting stuck on an elevator, in a very tiny elevator. I have claustrophobia, and I always have this reoccurring nightmare. And yesterday, it finally happened. I walked in, pressed the button, immediately, it didn't open. I'm like, are you kidding me? One of my last days here in Santa Monica, I've lived in this building 5 years, and one of my last days. And it's not productive cursing the world for your problems, because you have the problem, okay? The question is, what are you going to do about the problem now that it has happened? What is the most, and think, so if you catch yourself spiraling downwards, just change your way of thinking to, what is the most productive action I can take in this moment right now, okay? What questions, not why questions. That's the key thing I talk about in this book. If you find yourself starting to go down the route of why, change all your questions to what. Credit to my friend Tasha Yorick who talks a lot about that. Does that make sense? I mean, what am I going to do? I'm stuck in an elevator. I could be blaming the elevator. What use is that going to do? You know what I did? I thought in my head of my friend Sharon. I thought, what would Sharon Salzberg do? She's a friend of mine who does meditation things, and she's like the calmest person I've ever met. And
by the way, by meditation, she's like one of the most renowned living spiritual teachers. Anyway, sorry, I had to say that.
Yeah, but me and her, to me, she's Sharon. Like, we text all the time, like, hey, homegirl, like, hey, girl. That's the kind of friendship I have with Sharon. And I think to myself, what would she say to me right now? And I heard her voice, which is surrender to the moment, surrender, and just meditate on what is. And your heartbeat, and I did. What felt like hours, it turns out I was only in there 25 minutes before the fire company came, and they were like prying it open. But that was the longest 25 minutes, I think, of my life. But I don't know if anyone else has claustrophobia, but that's like a really terrifying thing. But anyway, there's just lots of examples now where I just, if something happens that's shitty, I just don't complain. Now I think that's all caveats apply. If an injustice has happened to you, of course it's fair to try to right the wrong. Okay, all those caveats aside, but I'm not talking about social justice right now. I'm talking about whatever. It's a long line at Starbucks. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to start blaming everyone and start yelling at the barista, the poor barista who's like, it's not her fault either, really. So just going through life with a kind of a intentionality, a mindfulness, and a kind of gratefulness that you even have the container that can experience this world, good or bad, I think could be a really huge shift in your consciousness.
I want to say something really quick.
Yeah.
The question. There's a saying, I think there's a book that's popular right now, I've not read it, but it's don't believe everything your mind thinks.
That's true.
And like the thing that comes up for me when you say that is like when I think about those moments where I'm overwhelmed and like shit's hit the fan, having a horrible day, maybe something bad happens.
Yeah.
I'll let myself have those thoughts, but I won't buy into them.
That's exactly right. I have a whole section there, don't be a victim to your emotions,
Yeah.
where you create a distance between...
You can feel it, but you don't have to identify with it, right? It's like...
I remember you liked a tweet I wrote like 3 years ago.
Wow, that really stood out.
You really liked it. I remember you really liked it.
That was a big moment for you,
I
wasn't
said
it?
it was a big moment in my life when Mark Manson liked this tweet. The tweet said something like the transformational moment of my life, like the thing that changed forevermore is when I realized I can have a thought and not listen to it. And you liked that. But yeah,
I'm glad that stuck with you.
But it's true though, and you can train yourself to not take your thoughts and emotions so seriously.
Yeah, for sure.
I have this neurotic Jewish mother inside of me, and a big part of my upbringing has been to not take it so seriously.
I love you, Scott.
I love you too, man.
Hi, Scott. It's Casley. This is
Oh my
great.
God, world's
Congratulations.
expert on social.
Oh, that's very kind. This is awesome. Very happy for you. I was curious. I have nieces and nephews who are teenagers, and I see the victim mindset a lot with them. And I'm curious, what would you say to someone who's 15 or 16 who is in a victim mindset a lot and needs to rise above?
Read the book. Lots of techniques and things. I would give them a whole course. Don't be a victim to your past. Don't be a victim to your emotions. Don't be a victim to your cognitive distortions. With teenagers especially, you see a lot of cognitive distortions. You see catastrophizing is the number one that 15-year-olds have. So everything that happens, it's immediately the worst case scenario in their head. And so you can actually challenge them and say, okay, let's do a little exercise. I want you to tell me what's the worst thing that could happen from this scenario. What's the best thing that could happen? Now, I want you to tell me what's the most likely thing to happen in this scenario. Really challenging their cognitive distortions, because adults have a lot of cognitive distortions too, but especially teenagers. Yeah, great question. And thanks for coming. Hi.
The understanding of that maybe just life is just challenging.
Yeah.
And how we can, because one of the things that I notice is that everything that you say sounds good in theory, but in practice, I notice, for example, that if I'm trying to change, it's like a long-term process. And I find that it's very challenging to sit and not take those emotions so seriously when it does feel very prevalent. And it revisits me often when I'm trying to change. Like, even when I'm trying to grow, I find that gap sometimes can feel really wide. So can you get more granular?
I have a section there called Warning, You Have a Case of Life. I do have my cheeky voice in there, so which is good. I'm glad that I kept my voice in there. It seems like people today have not gotten the memo that you can't expect to be happy all the time, right? It's almost like the second someone is not happy, it's like, what's wrong? Immediately, what medicine can I take? Or what, guru can I listen to? Let's go to Jay Shetty's podcast or something, whatever, and find out how to be happy. As opposed to why do you have to immediately be anything else than you currently are? So I think, first of all, just changing your whole expectation of life, first of all. I know it sounds kind of funny, changing, expect less out of life. But it just feels like a lot of people expect that is their default. They should be happy all the time, or they should feel happy all the time, or that things should always go their way during the course of the day. And that's not the best way of thinking about the price of admission to life.
Scott, would you comment on if there is a correlation between the feeling of being a victim and the response seemingly allowing you to be uncivil? There's this rise of incivility.
Wow, that's a big topic. I have a lot of sections about that. There's a really cool paper where they made participants feel like they were a victim of a computer error, which gave them 3 cents less money than someone else. And when they had that condition, people felt more justified acting like an asshole. So they were more likely to, they gave them, they're like, hey, do you want to send a puff of white noise to the other participants who weren't victims of the situation? And they were much more likely to be like, yeah, give them the puff of. So they felt entitled to act aggressively because they were a victim of something. And I see that everywhere in our society today, in so many different ways. I think it's a shame. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Mark, you talked a little bit about post-traumatic growth. Scott, I'm going to plug one of the other books you co-authored, Choose Growth.
Thank you.
I'd love to know, I know you talked about like the difference between transcend and rise above. I'd love to know, is there any bridge between some things you talk about in Choose Growth, right? Like processing, right? I'm a high school teacher. It's so important, especially for teenage boys, to like process things that happen for them. I'd love to know what bridges, if any, do you see from Choose Growth or your other books into Rise Above?
Well, the big one is post-traumatic growth. That's Choose Growth was all about post-traumatic growth. Also, my co-author, Jordan Feingold, who's amazing, her voice was in that book a lot as well, and she's a little bit more cheery than I am. She was at the Imagination Institute, and she was the chief extrovert officer, just to give you an idea. So the tone of Choose Growth, everything in Choose Growth is like, it's gonna be okay, it's gonna be okay, it's great. And I think, but I think that is a link into this, is the post-traumatic growth literature. But I'm quite realistic in this book, I think, and as well as being hopeful. And it's not over-optimism, I don't think.
I have a question. Like, I think to me, like what you're saying, like we rise above our trauma and all this. And what is the biggest challenge of what is the role of habits in understanding how we could rise up, in a way that, yes, I'm going to think about all this. Like, I come from Uganda, and always we're told life is so bad. You come to the US, and you find life is so bad also here, and then so then you're in this mindset.
It's true.
So what is the role of habits, you're thinking and your day-to-day thinking in creating this rising, when you're rising on the journey that you're on?
Well, I would love to hear Mark's thoughts on this as well, but all these things are habits of mind, habits of, I view personality as just habits, you literally are changing your personality if you change your habit of thinking, behaving, and feeling. So habits is a big part of it, and setting new habits of mind, it really can be done, and it can be really transformational. I can't impress enough upon people if they are so used to and have a habit of a victim mindset, just how transformational it is in their life to change their habitual ways of thinking, so that they start to think in a more empowered way. But I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I think a habit is one way to look at it. I often think of it as like a muscle, a lot of these things are muscles within your brain. They exist within all of us, but if you're not using the muscle regularly, and I think this woman over here was talking about how the frustration of trying and trying and trying, and it just takes so long. To me, it's very similar of imagine you have a part of your body that has just been underutilized for 20 years, and then you go to the gym, and it's everything you do is going to hurt intensely, and the progress is going to be very slow and arduous and difficult. And so I think that is, to your point, Scott, I think setting expectations around what this process looks like what any kind of growth process looks like, is that it's, for some reason, and maybe we can blame this on the self-help industry, but I think for some reason when it comes to psychological stuff, people have unrealistic expectations that if a therapist or a doctor tells me a thing, then I'm going to be okay, and or it's going to be different this time, whereas it's actually more analogous to going to the gym. You have to go to the gym regularly for years to be able to lift a certain amount of weight. But once you do get to that point where you can do it, you're so much stronger, more resilient, you bounce back faster, you recover quicker. There it is. There it is.
Absolutely, Mark.
You deal with the shit shows better.
Yeah, really well said. I really love your work. And,
Thanks, dude.
I really love your work. Yeah.
Thank you.
I've resonated. Well, I've resonated with it for many years, and it feels like a natural. I almost lost my shit. It feels like such a. I almost had a heart attack. I was like, I can't lose this. But I feel like we're on a similar wavelength. Don't you feel that way?
Well, I remember you told me.
awkward.
I remember when you started working on this.
Yeah.
You told me about it, and you were a little bit like anxious about it.
Yeah,
you were like, oh man, I might be walking into a buzzsaw here.
That's true.
But I remember being excited for you and being happy about it, because it is you do have such a positive
Thank you.
take. I mean, you combine the credibility of your incredible academic career with just this very humanistic approach of just like seeing the potential in everybody, and that definitely comes through in this. So
I'm so glad you said that.
yeah. Do we get a magic trick?
Oh, you know what? I'll do some outside in the lobby. Yeah.
This guy is actually a freakishly good magician, and I don't know how it happened. He learned in like
A year.
not even. So check out some magic in the lobby.
Maybe. Hey, thank you everyone for coming in. This book is for everyone. So
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.